promised, before we can jump into the book of Enoch or the fallen angels and the Nephilim, we must first start
before the beginning. Is the earth young or old?
And how does God's creation play into the world of science?
Was there something created before God hovered over the chaos?
Before we can jump into the book of Enoch or the fallen angels and the Nephilim, we must first start before the beginning.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And I'm Penny. Welcome to
Live Life in the Spirit. We are super excited that you've come to our site today.
Either on purpose or happy accident.
If you're looking for real truth, real joy, real Jesus, you've come to the right place.
Hi, I'm Pastor Penny Schulz.
And I'm Kristen Kipper.
And welcome to
Live Life in the Spirit.
We are so glad you're joining us today, and we are going to be diving in to the before the beginning. If you've ever watched Lion King, then Lion King 2.5, and it was before the beginning. That's 1.5.
Sorry, I'm having a total deja vu moment. I swear you said that when we did this before the beginning the first time. I think we talked about the Lion King. I think we did.
I might have.
Because it does make me think of that too. Sorry, I'm just like, I would bet money that if we went back and watched that, we said that then.
You might have.
Oh, that's funny. Sorry.
We are so glad you're joining us, and if you've been a follower and you've seen some of our way before the beginning past episodes, we dove a little bit into this, but we're going to dig in a lot farther, dive a lot deeper, and really explore. This is kind of our wheelhouse. When we get into the fallen realm and we get into the before the Genesis and what caused a lot of the stuff before man ever came on the scene. And how that rival and that war, that seed war, has been with us all the way up through to the end of time.
We get excited about it and jazzed up because while it doesn't change our salvation, it certainly influences every aspect of our faith.
And we've always said you can't win a war you don't know you're fighting. And so that's why we're going to dig in today and kind of pick that apart. But before we get into the fallen realm, we need to get into what that maybe looked like before they fell. So if you want to catch our past episodes or even our recent ones, the ones on Revelation, you need to check us out at livelifeinthespirit.com.
You can also find all of our content on our YouTube and Rumble channels, on multiple podcast feeds, and then for our joy breaks and little short teasers, you can find us on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Facebook, and Instagram.
And I tell you what, the ones that we have up there right now on the joy breaks, they are so much fun. We had a blast doing that. We got out so much.
We have a lot of short clips because we recorded ourselves being quite funny for about an hour.
Oh, at least.
At least. Yeah.
Well, from that funny, we're going to get a little serious today. And if you are in for a light read, if you're looking for a light read, you can find the book from the late Dr. Tom Horn and his daughter, Reverend Donna Howell. They did this before Genesis, and they dig in to some pretty heavy stuff, the stuff that most people in religious sectors do not even want to touch.
And it's an amazing book. It's got a lot of great information. We'll highlight some of it, but if you want to dig in more, this is a good read.
So we want to look at before the beginning, before the angels fell. We know that God created them, and they were our elder siblings. If you want to think about it, I think Timothy Alberino wrote a book on that. Well, God set out and he created the entire angelic order. He fashioned each angel unique, just like us, and gifted each one with different talents.
There's not just one type. Paul even tells us in Ephesians 6:12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." Sounds like we went a long ways from God created the angelic beings to where we are in Ephesians 6.
Yes, although not really, because God had already created all of them back then, but it's not recorded that way.
Right.
I mean, we see tidbits throughout scriptures, but it isn't until Paul in Ephesians, and we even see in Titus that they bring this up. In Titus 3:1, put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work. The problem is we have the 66 canonical books in our Bible. Mm-hmm. But the Hebrew had a plethora of other known literature that was solid literature that they had learned from, that they knew. And that's why you see throughout our Bible, it's like you see a snippet of what was said in Jasher, or what was said in Enoch, or what was said in all these extra biblical, well, not biblical, these extra Jewish scrolls. Mm-hmm. In fact, they found a lot of them in Qumran.
Yes.
In the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so that's why they know that a lot of this stuff is true. There's actually a full writing of the book of Enoch that was preserved from Ethiopia.
So you can't tell me that there's not value to these texts. And the Jews in that time, in Jesus' time, and even before, would have been aware of these texts and referenced them and knew about them. And so even though if there are some details that maybe aren't all accurate, there's value in what they have to offer.
Well, and even if they just put a line in, like Jude does here or there, he didn't have to explain everything else because he knew that the average person reading this already could fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like you talked about when Jesus mm-hmm. is on the cross and he starts
my God, why have you forsaken me?
Yes, he starts quoting from Scripture.
From Psalms.
Yes. He already knew that they would know the rest. Mm-hmm. So they do that a lot. They reference these texts that others in that area would already have known.
Well, the Bible allows for the old earth before the initial formation of the planet and the recreation in Genesis 1:3. I know that is probably an explosive statement right there. We're going to dig in today to something that is probably controversial, something that is not of the popular view. You have to have sides, it seems like, on everything. And so you have to have an old earth theory versus a young earth theory. But what if both of those could actually coincide?
And could marry what we know from science with what Scripture actually says. Because I think we get so lost in what we think Scripture says or what we've been told Scripture says. But if we go to the original text, it is not the same.
So did God create the heavens and earth, or did he create and recreate earth in Genesis 1:3? So in our episode back at the very beginning,
episode 2, I think
it was, the Chaos Dragon. What is the Chaos Dragon? Well, in Hebrew, so you have words in Hebrew that can mean one thing and it can also mean two, and they can mean the same thing at the same time. So the word yam is the word for sea, but it's also the word used for the Chaos Dragon. We see that not only at the very beginning, but we see it as the Chaos Dragon, the Yam, in Revelation at the end, where it says, and the sea is no more. He's not talking about water. He's talking about this entity. Maybe asking, or maybe you have asked the question, why did God create the angels in the first place? We have to realize that we're talking, there is no time and space in heaven, so we have no idea how old the angels really are, how much farther ahead they were created. But they were created to be in a relationship with God. They weren't created to be his servants.
No.
They were created to fulfill, well, a life, mm-hmm. an eternal life. They're eternal beings. They're spirit beings, while we are of the flesh. Now, there's only one. They don't go in and describe a lot of them unless you get into some extra text, but from Ezekiel, sticking with what the Bible, what the Scriptures say, Ezekiel's words, the earth was Lucifer's kingdom from the moment of his creation.
Of his creation. We know that the angels would have been formed long before mm-hmm. we were. So that means earth was there.
Exactly.
At some point.
So if you can, let's expand our mind just a little bit and give us a chance to think of this open-minded. God creates. God is a God of creation. We don't know when all of this stuff, what he has created, when he's created it, where he's created it. So let's just picture if he had created, we'll say our earth, who knows if it was even called that.
Right.
But if he had created
something
before he even created Lucifer, and it was supposed to be for Lucifer. Let that settle for just a moment. He began as an anointed cherub who was perfect in beauty. He was covered in precious gemstones, residing upon
the mountain of God,
which means he was able to walk. To me, that's the throne room. He was able to walk in and out of God's presence. He was perfect in his ways from the day he was created until iniquity was found within him. Now, this is all from Ezekiel 28:12 through 15.
So that paints a picture that we don't often look at.
Lucifer was called the angel of light. He was the morning star, the light bringer. He was beautiful. And some even say, this is scholars that have gone through other texts, that he was actually created for Christ.
To be a companion or it really is impossible to put into words the magnitude of that, but there was supposed to be a special connection or a relationship. He was for Christ in some way. At least some scholars have dug into the text and found that.
Well, here's the thing, though. The angels, when they were created, they weren't created as servants or as puppets. They were given free will from the moment they were created. Now, if sin had never entered into God's perfect realm, that's pretty powerful when you think of what free will can do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they had the kind of relationship with God that we had in the garden initially. And I mean, it was this open, free connection. It was perfect.
Why would you even want to change that?
It's hard to understand.
And yet, we see that that's exactly what happened with Lucifer. Because of that, he attempts to exalt his throne above God, above Christ.
It tells us in Isaiah 14:13 that he attempted to exalt his throne above God. Pride got in the way, and he thought he was better than. He could do it better. He was just as beautiful or precious or powerful. It didn't go well.
But if pride is part of sin, and sin had not existed yet, it makes you wonder.
It does make you wonder.
It makes your brain hurt when you think about it. Well, Jesus said in Luke 10:18, he said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Okay, if Satan was created for Jesus, there's that, why would he even say that unless there is that personal connection? Luke 10, it makes you wonder. I see a connection here with the betrayal that he had from his own appointed cherub, who decided that he was better than Christ, better than God. And then him sitting with Judas.
Oh, absolutely.
His earthly betrayer. Who Satan enters. That is just such a profound connection.
It really is.
You know, for Christ there was no time or space. And so he knew, he saw all this happening in real time. That when Lucifer fell, to when Judas would betray. Yeah. That's really mind-blowing.
It is.
It makes our brains hurt. And in Revelation, chapter 12, verses 3 and 4, he talks about taking the third of the heavenly angels with him. Now, we have no idea how many angels there are anyway. They're like the sands of the sea. I mean, you can't count them. I mean, there's quadrillions. I mean, you couldn't even count them. And a third fell.
It's a massive number, and it's interesting because it said whose first estate wasn't good enough for them. So perfection with God wasn't good enough. That I struggle to even wrap my brain around.
However, we are not so much different than the angels.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there is so much parallels here, because how many times have we been in situations where we had everything that we could want, and yet it wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough, and we destroy what we had for wanting something better.
Right.
Unfortunately, though, their ultimate fate for those who fell is everlasting chains under darkness unto judgment for the great day, and that's found in Jude 6. So all these scriptures are sprinkled throughout the whole Bible of what we have, let alone the extra.
All of the scrolls and text outside the canon of Scripture.
So when they fall the first time, they come down to what is our earth, which would make sense if that had been created for Satan.
Right.
He wasn't Satan at the time. He had a name. I will argue that it's not Lucifer. There's actually an entire book on that. It's Hallel, because when you look at the Hebrew, it is not. They just come up with the word Lucifer. Nowhere in there
It's
is
not
there
in the
even
Hebrew.
any letters that would be other than an L at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So we could spend a lot of time arguing about the logistics of that. For just argument's sake, we'll just use the word Lucifer in exchange for Satan or the Satan. So when Satan comes down, Lucifer, he brings those angels. However, I'm having a hard time believing that a third of the angels
Went with him.
well to hear. Because, but we don't know. You have to realize this is the first creation. So we have no idea how big it was, and we have no idea the expanse.
Right.
Or how spiritual beings can inhabit
A tangible space. Right.
So what we see in Genesis is they are there. And then it says that God created the heavens and the earth.
Genesis 1:1 and 2 say, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was chaos and waste. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and the Ruach Elohim was hovering upon the surface of the water."
So actually a lot of people just read right from here and they jump right on. Those two verses are explosive. There's so much to unpack just from that, and that talks about this entire void period. If you look at the Hebrew, it's called tohu and bohu. Without form, those words mean without form and void. God moved upon the face of the waters.
If we dig into the meaning of the words tohu and bohu, there's several different scholars who have really dug into that. And there's a lexicon from a group of Hebrew linguists that have really devoted their life to studying this. The most basic meaning of tohu is formlessness, confusion, unreality, and emptiness. So a formlessness of primeval earth, of land reduced to primeval chaos. And nothingness, an empty space, like space of trackless waste. Now those were referenced both in Isaiah and in Deuteronomy. So these words are in the Bible
Job.
elsewhere. Yes.
So it's land reduced to a chaotic state, not land formed that way in the beginning. Now the second definition is the same word, figurative, empty, unreal, groundless idols, which that is interesting. Formless, it was reduced to chaos and trackless waste. It's kind of the same thing.
Well, in order for it to be reduced to this, it had to be something before. So tohu became associated with this idea of malevolence and chaos. It sort of took on a different figurative word aside from just the literal what it meant.
So God had created it in one fashion, and after the angels fell, it turned into a state of malevolent chaos.
And it was waste. Bohu, which is generally translated as the void, so formless and void is tohu and bohu, but those are just, they're lacking in depth in what those words really meant. So under that similar lexicon, It means earth under judgment, some sort of devastation, stones used to break down walls. It speaks of this destructive evil
that reduced the earth to chaos and brought the planet under judgment. All this is well before God ever said
that it was good.
So here we have just those first 2 verses are so full and tell us really what was going on. You know, when we think about it, there again, you can't get an evolutionary theory of boom and all this came about if there was already something there.
Mm-hmm.
Which you got to have dust to go boom.
That's true.
Which means there was something already there.
And we can talk at some point in time about how much faith it would require to think that magically a boom could happen and everything could fall into place to the delicate intricacy that even the simplest of life is, let alone
it's all
human
perfect.
form. Yeah.
Again, we have no time frame. We have no concept of this from when those angels first fell on this earth, what it looked like before, but they obviously started establishing a hierarchy.
Right.
They obviously started establishing their civilization of what it would look like. So if Satan fell because he thought his throne should be exalted above God, well, what do you think he did here?
I'm sure he made himself exalted above all the others that fell.
Which would explain why we have temples that are all full of serpents. I mean, concrete, stone carved serpents all over them. So you have scientific researchers and archaeologists had found Göbekli Tepe, which was over 10,000 years old. And now they found Tempe Karhan, which is over 12,000 years old. If you go by man and you back it up to Adam at 6,000 years ago, or
Right.
6.5, or almost 7,000, whatever, those are all before man.
So it had begged the question, and it has made it very difficult for some people to accept Christianity if that's the only explanation. Well, nothing could have existed before that. And yet things do. And so then how do we reconcile that without taking away from God's power? Because he certainly created it all. But maybe our understanding of how and when isn't right.
A lot can happen in 2 verses.
Yes, it can.
So if they had created, and I love that part because it was talking about some sort of a devastation, stones being used to break down walls. So how many other of these ziggurat structures do we have that were built to exonerate Satan, or Lucifer, we'll say for that matter, or whoever else fell with it? A lot of people will say Shemiaza and Azazel were right up there at the top. Did they each have their own ziggurat? We don't know. We don't know about the temple. We just know this world, whatever it looked like before, was totally different, and they devastated it because sin had come in to this world, and it was chaos, and it was formless,
and it was
a
evil.
mess. Now we talked about the chaos dragon again.
Mm-hmm.
So the chaos dragon can be associated with Satan and Lucifer. And this is where we get to that second part of the second verse. It says the rock Elohim was hovering, the face of God, the breath of God was hovering over the face and the surface of the water. Now this is water in this translation, but it would be Yam.
Of the Yam.
He saw it, and that's when he split it. And then that's when God said, let there be light. Now this isn't the light as we know it because sun had not yet been created. What was the light? So he's bringing order. He's bringing his light into the darkness, into the chaos. Which means
and that's
there has to be a creation.
Well, and it's interesting because it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we always assume then that that happens and then right away the light happens. But I think there's just so much in between. Yes, he created the heavens and the earth and all of this happened. And then he said, let there be light. He's bringing goodness and bringing himself back to earth after he had kind of left it up to Satan.
And he is recreating the earth.
Right.
So that's how we can have an old earth and we can have a new earth.
And new because humanity hadn't gotten here yet.
Well, and then we get into, God then goes through all the different things. He does the planets, he does the sun and the moon, and he does the fish and then the animals. So when did the dinosaurs come about? How do we know what day one, Yom day, but it's not our 24-hour day, I am sure.
Right.
Again, this big expanse of time.
Right.
So if God has come in and it's kind of like I think of when the parents leave and they leave their kids home alone. Like this Lord of the Flies, they kind of do their own thing. And there can be nothing but chaos and they can destroy everything. And then when the parents come home, there's order.
Right.
And clean up, recreation of that space.
It's a good analogy.
I think we can all, but God does everything. The analogy, there's so much of a parallel, and that's why he calls himself Father and why we're his children. And same way with the angels. And
right.
They didn't get it right either.
I haven't heard this ever talked about in a Sunday sermon very often, or in a Sunday school, or vacation Bible school, or even a Bible study.
You're not going to hear it from most seminaries either. Because they just focus with what has been passed down, the tradition, when everything started and how it was. And we know all that other stuff's there, but we're just not going to think about it and we're not going to worry about it. Or even at a time where most seminaries are coming out of there that Satan's not even real, he's just a symbol of evil in this world. I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed. But when you go back into the scriptures, you see that he was very real. Mm-hmm. You see that the Bible talks a lot about that angelic realm. And the reason why they do is because there are so many parallels. They want to show that look what happened when they chose poorly. Mm-hmm. And why they fell and the destruction that had. But yet, the Bible is one big overarching love story. And I would say it starts right there with not only 1:1, but it starts with 1:1 and then 1:2 is the big continuation because he could have called it quits right there.
Right. And he didn't.
He didn't. He recreated and started again. And as we know, as you get into Genesis and 2 and 3, that we're going to get into man being created. And again, he could have stopped it, but he doesn't. We're going to dig into that a lot more a little later, but we just really kind of want to look at this before time.
The reason this is becoming more and more important for us to have a conversation about and really start to look at it is because you have so many people who are not willing to look at the case for Christ, who are not willing to be believers because they look at what we can see and observe in the scientific world, and if it doesn't match this idea of Earth being, anywhere from 6 to 10,000 years old, then God just can't exist. It just can't be. And we can.
Or you have the opposite.
Right.
It's like the Earth is billions of years old, and so how could that have just happened with the last 6,000?
Right. And so there's this disconnect between faith and Christianity and the Bible and science. And what this book really delves into, and there's lots of other sources that do, is that it actually, nothing in science can counter God. It can only add to.
Or prove.
And really bring things together in different ways that maybe we just haven't considered it before.
And you may be saying, yeah, but what about the dinosaurs? Well, God created the dinosaurs as well, but we would argue that they were not all huge and big and carnivore. They started out as herbivore. In fact, I think probably a lot of the animals at that time that were survived on the ark with Noah were of the dinosaurs, but they were much, smaller.
Much smaller.
But you get the angelic realm then that starts messing and manipulating with everything, and you turn herbivores into carnivores, and everything gets skewed. How we know this is true, because if you go by the scientific side that, the dinosaurs all died out millions of years ago, well then how do you explain the fact that thorns and thistles did not even come about until after Adam and Eve ate of the fruit and got kicked out of the garden? That is when thorns and thistles came. Well, when you find fossils of dinosaurs that have thorns and thistles
In the same...
in their gut, what would have been their gut? Yeah, how does that work? And how do we find fossils where there's a human footprint and then a dinosaur footprint over the top of it?
Right. There's evidence that supports a lot of this. It's just been hidden or shoved to the side because it doesn't match the secular view and of the science. Because, well, anything that Satan can do to take us away from God or to try to make it seem like God doesn't exist or he's not all that, that's what Satan wants to do.
And that is really, we're not going to dig into this whole book because there is a lot, but they have a major, major case for all of this, how we can merge the old earth and the new earth together. One, you had the original creation, and then you have the recreation, and then you have man coming in. It does, and then you have the flood. So I would argue then there's a third creation. And God could have called it quits with every single one of them, and yet again, because of that overarching love, he
keeps giving us opportunities to get back to him.
And if you have watched our Revelation series, if you have not, you need to. That's why we dig in, because again, that arching love goes all the way through to the very end, when there is now a fourth recreation of the new heaven and the new earth. So it's not a one and done.
No. And that's really scriptural throughout. God has sort of wiped the slate clean, or at least started as fresh as possible multiple times, because he wants to continue to give us the opportunity to get back to him.
And hence why Christ came the first time.
That's right. We wanted to take this opportunity to show you a little bit about the depth and richness of the angelic realm and all of God's creation that happened before he created man. Because God didn't just wake up one day and decide he wanted to create. He is a creator, and he has done it all throughout. And so this just shows the beginning of that, or before our beginning.
Mm-hmm. And I'm excited because this is going to start a series we're going to be looking at where we're going to really dive in to more of Enoch. We're going to look at more of that fallen realm, what they did when they were here on earth, and why Genesis 6 is so prevalent. Another thing that you're not going to hear in church, you're not going to hear in the seminaries, but it changes everything. And why those words have been changed, that actually started with the printing press. It kind of started with the early church fathers, when stuff that had been in the Hebrew scriptures for thousands of years, one word or two words changed.
Right.
Can omit an entire thing that doesn't make sense unless you know what's really going on with the fallen realm and how they have been at it from the very beginning to separate that relationship that we have with God, to try to turn us away from being in the image of him, mm-hmm. and to destroy his creation. They're really trying to get back to that original chaos.
They're really trying to get back to this world that they had destroyed, this malevolent, evil, destitute place.
When I think of that word, I think of Maleficent, which actually goes right along with Disney, and what did she turn into but a dragon? If you really look at her, she kind of looks like the Chaos Dragon, which has been with us from the beginning of time. But here's the thing. Regardless of all of this, it's cool to know, and it's even better when you understand the broader picture, because God has given us tools to fight with, but ultimately we have him. I mean, Paul talks about in Ephesians the armor that we wear. Well, why would he even tell us about armor unless we needed it to protect ourselves?
Right.
And that's why we bring this to you, is to just shine some of that light. In the beginning, there was light. That is the biggest statement I think that there could be.
God
Because
created.
God created yet again, and he came in and shed that light. So that way there would be order
In the
again.
chaos. And a light in the darkness.
So we thank you so much for joining us. Again, we're like super excited for the next ones coming up. And it seems very fitting that we're starting a new exciting series as we are embarking here on our 2-year anniversary, which just does not even seem possible.
No, it doesn't. Part of me feels like there's no way it's been 2 years, and part of me feels like it has to have been longer than that.
Yeah, for some reason it seemed like it was a lot longer.
Yeah.
Was it?
No? Wait a minute.
This would be our 3-year.
We started in 23. Did we go to Israel in 23?
Wow.
Math took a hit today. I don't remember celebrating 2 years. It's because you were on sabbatical.
That's
like we were like there was that big push, and all that stuff was going, and so we didn't
do
really
it.
do much.
All right, we're gonna go back to that. Well, this is super exciting because as we are starting a new series, we realize that we are coming up on our third anniversary. We kind of skipped over number 2 because I was on sabbatical and we took that time off. And it won't be too terribly long before we hit our 100th episode. So we want to thank each and every one of you who've watched and who supported us and who have our t-shirts that you display proudly.
Yes. And if you don't, check out our website. You can get a Live Life in the Spirit t-shirt. As always, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, comment. We would love to hear from you and engage with you.
Tell your friends, and that's what keeps us on the air. This topic is not any different. As always, once you know, you can't unknow. And what you choose to do with that information is up to you.
But you can't say, we didn't tell you.
Until next time.
Shalom.